Okay, I think we're ready to get started. So thank you everyone for coming. It's a really great turnout, and I appreciate everybody coming out on a beautiful day like today. And I think the turnout is kind of respective of the content that we're going to cover. It's really interesting content. We've got an amazing panel. Super happy that everybody can come from all the kind of various apps and app development shops and all the experience that you guys are bringing to the panel. My name is Arkady Fridman, and I'm with CleverTap. And CleverTap is a mobile analytics and engagement platform in the form of an SDK that you plug into your app. We've got all the tools to enable app developers to make their apps smarter through engagements, through cohort analysis, all kind of tools that you would need to do that. And we're free up to 1 million users. So that's one of the big differentiators in addition to the speed and all the stuff that you can do with our app. And we also have, we just launched a startup program for startups and mobile developers where you can access our marketing knowledge and include our SDK. So we'd love for you to check out our site. And without further ado, I also wanted to mention that at the end of this panel, we're going to give away a really cool prize, something that's not out yet. It's called a Helix Cuff by Ashley Cole. One of the designers from Nokia designed it. It's essentially like a Bluetooth headset that is in the form of a bracelet. And we're going to give you a certificate, and it's going to come directly from the manufacturer. So keep your little red stubs to the end. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce Malcolm, our CMO at CleverTap, and let you take it from here.
Thanks, Arkady. Hello to everybody. Thanks for coming. I want to just thank you to General Assembly for hosting us. This is the second one of these we've done. And now that we're sponsored by the Virgin guy, we're obviously highfalutin now. I'll tell you a funny story in a few minutes. But let me first introduce the panel. From my left, Julia, why don't you give us a little bit about yourself? Do these guys need the mic to talk? Or we can...
Hi everybody, I'm Julia Schulhof. Happy International Women's Day. Anyway, I have been working mostly on native mobile apps from the business development and product development side since the App Store launch, which is 2008, scarily 20 years ago. And I've worked for some big media companies like Condé Nast first. And
Can you turn the mic up a bit because we can't hear?
Is that okay?
Yes.
Better?
Yeah.
Okay. So I've worked at big media companies like Condé Nast first, and most recently at Exo Group, which is the knot and the bump for those of you who are familiar with weddings and with babies. And then most recently I've been working with a company called Oyster Labs, and we do mobile product services and mostly focus on the health and wellness space, as well as some we work with Sony, which is kind of a departure from that.
My name is Mohsin. I recently launched a mobile app called Dash.By. Dash.By is a platform to discover dishes, order delivery, and make a social impact. The social impact we're trying to make is to end childhood hunger locally, nationwide. And we're starting with New York because approximately 1 in 4 kids in New York are facing hunger today. And given that we're in one of the wealthiest cities in the world, that just didn't sit right with me. So what we're doing is we're sort of like the Toms of ordering food. If you're familiar with Tom's shoes, whenever someone orders a pair or buys a pair of shoes, they give a pair to someone in need, a child in need. So we work with City of Harvest that every time you order a meal from a local restaurant in New York, we have approximately 1,000 restaurants in New York, we'll share a meal with a child facing hunger at no additional cost to the user. We launched recently in December 2015, and we've already fed 40,000 meals to those in need, and we're hoping to feed over 1 million meals this year. So we're just getting started.
Hey everyone, my name is Brian Langel. I'm a co-founder of Dash. Dash, we're building a connected vehicle platform. We take a little piece of hardware, plug it into your car, connects to your phone via Bluetooth, and we analyze your driving habits and behaviors to help you save money on gas, give you information in terms of what's wrong with your car when something happens, and also to make it safer by giving you accident prevention information, being able to hook into 911, etc. Prior to founding Dash about 3 years ago, I was working at another startup that I did that was wildlife tracking, collars, and prior to that I worked at a number of kind of bigger companies and doing software development at HBO, at Union Pacific, and McGraw-Hill. And none of those were mobile applications. That was all before iPhone. And so Dash is really the first kind of foray I've had into doing user engagement on phone.
My name is Ryan Matzner. I'm a co-founder at Fueled. We're one of the bigger app development agencies here in New York. But we kind of also like to think of ourselves as sort of a co-founder in a way. We work with our clients to help them through the early product planning stages, figuring out what they should build, how we should go about building it, all the way through design, development, marketing, even helping them recruit their first employees, and then oftentimes also investing in them.
And I'm out. Look, here. I'm Malcolm Friedberg. I'm the CMO of CleverTap. Again, appreciate you guys showing up today. My background is 20 years B2B marketing, cut my teeth in email, marketing automation. So mobile to me is kind of the next channel for marketers as they evolve in time. And hopefully you'll be able to take some tidbits away today. So I want to start, just to give the conversation a little structure, I want to talk about engagement, what it is, how do you do it well, how do you scale your app, and so hopefully keep it fairly concrete. I do encourage you to ask questions along the way. It's better format than waiting for the end, and things aren't really contextual, so please don't be shy about raising your hand. And that's it. Okay, we're going to so one of the things that I'm going to get Ryan and Brian confused, so I'll just tell you that ahead of time. I'm also going to screw up Mohsin's name because my eldest is named Mason and his younger brothers call him Mohsin, so too many, things float around my head. But Ryan said something very interesting which I want to pick up on, which is, how do you think about developing an app? Like, forget engagement, forget all of it. Like, let's go back to the core. When you start and you're thinking about building an app, what are the things you should think about?
I think a lot of founders identify a problem. Oftentimes they have some domain expertise in that space, and they identify a problem that they think can be solved through technology. But that's not when they call us. They then come up with a solution. I like to think of it as a proposed solution, but usually clients will think of it as the solution. And that's when they reach out to us. And then one of the important things that my team does is help them understand how that maybe is just a proposed solution, that there might be other options, and then how to go about actually bringing this to life or deciding what should be brought to life. And that's a really important process, is not just assuming that the solution you have in mind is the right one, but assuming that it might be the right one. So conducting an experiment rather than building an app, thinking of it really as, hey, what do we think is the best way to solve this, and then how are we going to go about building an MVP or a small version of this that allows us to test that hypothesis? What would we consider a successful test, and what would be considered a failure? What happens, what are we going to do if it's somewhere in the middle? Things like that. And so that's kind of a key part of the approach, is thinking of it more about as a hypothesis.
Mohsin, you went to a space that's obviously fairly crowded, right? You've got a lot of other players delivering meals. Your twist on it is the nonprofit aspect of it, but you still have to be successful as a business. How did you go through the process of looking what other people had done and deciding, hey, we like that, we want to borrow that, but we want to kind of bring our own spin to it?
Sure. I think our initial sort of hook and our main cause is the social aspect of it, but we don't want to just be a charitable Seamless or a charitable Grubhub. We want to go above and beyond and do better than what our competitors are doing. And what we realized is that one of the things the competition doesn't do in our space is they don't really focus on dish discovery. They don't have dish level ratings. They don't have dish level pictures generated by users. So what we're trying to do is, while we get sort of gain users and gain volume, is to create enough data where if you're in a mood for something like a kung pao chicken, for example, then you could search for kung pao chicken, find the restaurants that are delivering that to you, see what is rated at each restaurant and how it looks at each restaurant. So you might end up realizing this 3.7-star restaurant you wouldn't have ordered from has a 5-star kung pao chicken, and that's what you're in the mood for. So we believe that, you know, while we continue to gain more and more users, and they're populating that data will become valuable to us and make people come back later on. So I think we're using the opportunity as we scale to gather as much data as possible that we can use to engage our customers more down the road.
Brian, what about you when you thought about Dash? How did you guys think about differentiating?
Yeah, so for us, you know, we were constrained to, not constrained, but we had selected our application. And so it was really then figuring out the features. And so that's the proposal aspect that Ryan was talking about. What are the proposed features that we're going to do? And then I think the big important thing is actually figuring out what metrics, because not all these features can actually be put in place. And for us, it was saying, okay, we know we want to try experiment on 5 features, but when do we know that a feature's failed? And I think that can be a hard thing because you can kind of trick yourself or keep believing, well, if we just change this aspect of it, maybe people will start using it more. If we do this thing a little differently, you know, that was really the reason this feature wasn't resonating with people. And so really selecting metrics up front and just being honest with yourself to say, okay, we are going into this and saying if this feature doesn't meet X, Y, and Z after, you know, some set period of time, that's our metric and we have to stick to that, because there's so many different things you can do in terms of your application, your startup, and your life in general. You just have to figure out, okay, when's enough is enough, and really, you know, stick to it.
How did you find out what was working and what wasn't working?
Yeah, so that was the metric aspect, and it was really hard. So I think we did this poorly in the beginning because we would put features in and we would try to gauge metrics, but we hadn't thought enough about it up front to say, this is the kind of stop point. If we don't have X users, or, you know, if we don't have a user in this screen, you know, for Y minutes per month, then this feature doesn't work. And so in the beginning we did that poorly, and I think we've learned from that to say, okay, let's really plan up front and say, we've got to have some certain baseline threshold, and that's how we try to approach it now.
And what did you use in order to determine how many people were using what aspect or how long? I mean, was there a program that you developed, or was the App Store able to give you that information?
It's honestly a mix. You know, CleverTap clearly does a lot of that, which is great.
The first 20 goes to.
But you know, there is a lot of that. Some of it isn't going to be captured with a off-the-shelf product because it's particular to your users. So for us, it's driving, miles driven isn't something that, you know, CleverTap, Google Analytics captures, and so we do have to build some infrastructure to do that. And so that's another aspect of metrics, is just, do we have infrastructure and technology in place to be able to capture the metrics and analyze it?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest mistakes that founders make is that they'll just build something, put it out there. I think by sitting down before you even build anything, after you kind of know what you think you're going to build, and then setting up some metrics, just saying, this is what we're going to consider a success, and this is what we're going to consider a failure. And you might adjust afterwards, and you say, actually, that, you know, even though we missed the success mark, we still think it was a success. That's fine, you can do that. But you really should set some numbers and what areas of the app you think people are going to use the most, so that you can then go and compare and really not try and negotiate with yourself so much, like, oh, was that a success? I don't know.
Yeah, there's a famous phrase in writing called "kill your darlings." So that's one of the hard things as a creator to do, right? Is you really get an emotional attachment to a feature, the way you design something, and part of the discipline that these two guys are talking about is being able to let that go and let the numbers tell the story. Julia, I want to actually direct this to you. You introduced me to a phrase that you called it harnessing user psychology. Is that? It's a lot of big words for me. So can you explain that?
It's a very powerful thing. I was going to just add to the previous comments that one of the things I learned about is you have to track all the events that are going on in your app. I think one of the things I learned was you need to event track everything, which means tagging it. Like if you're integrating the SDK from a CleverTap or from whether it's Google Analytics or any of these other ones, make sure that you've got it set up so that everything's being tracked, because you do want to be able to set up those tests and look at those, funnels that you set up and see if there are leaks in them. Like if your goal is to achieve certain numbers, well, how are you going to know that if you don't have all the events tracked? And oftentimes, especially with native mobile apps, you just have to make sure that that's set up properly and test the heck out of it before you release it, otherwise you'll be sorry. I don't know if anyone else has had that experience itself.
Can you address some of the technologies you're using for that?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, just the technologies.
so the last apps I worked on, use Segment.io to capture, or now Segment to capture a lot of the data, and then on the, kind of the visualization piece that the product team used was Mixpanel. We also used Mode. We used a bunch of different things. Our analytics team was very open to integrating lots of SDKs and doing lots of experimentation. But getting back to the user psychology, I think the important thing there is to really understand what makes your users tick. I was sort of rereading, if any of you are familiar with Nir Eyal and his book Cooked, he also has a Udemy course, which is, I think, like $24. And next month, he's doing a workshop here in New York. Well worth the time and the money. I think it's a few $100s for the workshop, but if you can't do that, just get the book. He talks a lot about, what creates habits. How do you create habit-forming technology? Things that what makes Facebook something that people can't resist looking at for 40 minutes a day? And part of that is understanding what are the triggers, the itches that people intrinsically feel that they need to get scratched. A lot of times those are things like boredom, anxiety. Sometimes it's things like, happiness, but mostly, it's playing into those kinds of psychologies and understanding them, and then figuring out how your product addresses scratching those itches, if you will. That's a lot, really understanding at a granular level what your users want and need. And maybe they don't even quite understand it themselves. So I was working on an app that was helping women find the perfect wedding dress. And one of the things that women who are planning their weddings love to do is look at wedding dresses. And so, the anxiety of planning a wedding, because there is a lot around it, is kind of assuaged by that nice feeling of being able to scroll through thousands of beautiful dresses. And so, that's basically what you're doing, is you're making something sticky or addictive and getting repeat engagement by addressing what that user's internal triggers are. And a lot of times, initially, you're going to have to sort of say, come back and we'll show you more of the things that you love to get them to kind of come back and re-engage. But it's understanding those kinds of things on a granular level.
So, Ryan, I'd be curious, when you go and a client comes to you and says, we want to develop this kind of app, other than the creative and the ideation, are you going out and doing research, or are they bringing to you research that says, here's the psychology we're tapping into fear, we're tapping into whatever, or do you guys just kind of go from the gut?
I think it varies by project. As a product manager, or a product manager should be able to already know a lot of answers, be able to just be familiar with some existing research and what some other technology products have done, and just some kind of general psychology concepts. But then on a per product level, yeah, oftentimes we will convene a panel, or there's also some online survey tools you can use just to gather some very rough data. It's great to do a quick gut check and just and see how that compares with some data you're gathering. It can be expensive to do really in-depth data gathering, so it's kind of a trade-off. Building a really small type version of a product can also be cheaper than doing some in-depth research and bringing a panel together, so it's kind of making a choice there.
I have a question on the topic. What sort of retention numbers do you project as you develop an app?
Well, it depends on what the app does. If it's a social product, you would hope to see people coming back daily or multiple times a day. If it's flight booking, it'd be weird to expect your users to come back every day. unless you're only targeting travel agents.
So, I'm sorry, because retention is based on 1 day, 7 day, 30 day, and then social 90 day. When you're developing, say, a delivery service, or is it, you're counting those, how long they stay with the app, or is it the number of transactions?
I think I would look at the number of transactions or how frequently they're using the product. I mean, people should be eating probably 1 or 2 meals out of the house a day. And so if they're only using your app once a month, that seems a little low.
1 or 2 times out of the day, it might be a lot. The average New Yorker, we see that orders takeout or delivery 2 to 3 times a week. So we look at how much, how many times do our users use it. And right now, it's early, our average user uses orders 5 times a month. So if we think about it, if the average customer is ordering twice a week, they should be ordering 2 to 3 times a week, they should be ordering 8 to 12 times a month. So right now, we're at 5 times a month. So we know we have traction to gain, and there's things we need to do to increase the repeat usage of our customers. One of the things might be just continue to add more restaurants. The second thing is we don't have a transactional website yet, we just have an app. So to release a website to go along with the app. So there's things we're doing and we're tracking that usage. And you're right, it depends on the type of medium that you're providing to determine what the right repeat usage is.
So that's a great segue into engagement. Mohsin, explain, given that background of, we have a data point that says that people should be coming with this frequency, we've determined that they're under that, how do you go about approaching making up that delta? I mean, obviously you want more customers, but ultimately it's the repeat business that'll make you successful. So how do you think about and strategize about going after repeat customers?
So there's a lot of ways. First, I think the first thing is to understand why they're not coming back as often. So for us, we did a survey of our existing users to find out, why aren't they using it more? And we found the 2 main reasons were maybe their favorite restaurant wasn't on there yet, or they're ordering at work and it's just inconvenient for them to use an app. They want a transactional website so they can order on their desktop. So for us, those are the 2 main things. But beyond that, I think to increase engagement, push notifications help a lot. We've noticed that anytime we send out a push notification, we get a 30 to 40% increase in orders that day, as long as we time it appropriately. And for us, it's easy. People are using the app during lunch or dinner time. So for us, we know when the highest engagement is, so we know when to send out those push notifications. And we might talk about it later, and then you get the segmentations of those users and how to best, capture the most users when you send out those push notifications. So push notifications, emails, and targeting and understanding why they're not using it more is probably the main things I focus on.
So
How did you survey your users? What tool did you use to do that?
We use SurveyMonkey. It's simple. It's free for the first 100 surveys. So if you send it out to 100 people, it costs you nothing, and you get responses. And they have it formatted very well. It's very easy to use, very simple. You can do it in a few minutes, and you get very valuable data. And they aggregate it in a way that can be very helpful.
Go ahead, sir.
I was wondering about the churn that you have with the app, because I read an article yesterday targeting people that has went out to the app. Do you have a strategy for retargeting customers that you have lost?
Customers that have deleted the app or who just don't use the app again?
Both. So the churn of the app, basically.
So, we basically, our push notifications, we're using Mixpanel right now. We can tell, when was the last time someone ordered or have they ordered. And we target those people in a different way than we target our existing repeat users. Sometimes we give them better offers, we give them promo codes to come back, and they end up working. And you want to be careful not to continuously give people promo codes and they only use it when they're getting a discount, because you're going to lose out in the long run. But if you segment the people who haven't used it in a while or haven't used it since they downloaded it, you can give them a different deal than you would give someone else. So that's one of the ways we've really targeted those people who have fallen off or not used it.
I think something interesting to tie the points of kind of retention and churn together is that you really do have to segment your users. So for us, there's certain users that use our app only when something goes wrong with their vehicle. That's why they have our app. Other users want to use it every time they drive. So we don't want to parade or bombard the user with push notifications if they're only using it when something's wrong with their vehicle. And so this goes back to collecting those metrics to marking all your events and really understanding, okay, this user, I see their pattern of behavior. They're in the app when there is a check engine light, and so we know not to target them for these, other reasons.
Because there's a fine line in terms of marketing emails, like what is acceptable and what is just spam, So what are your thoughts on that?
Having an email background, I will tell you that the threshold for paying with email is much higher than it is for mobile.
Yeah.
So I can send you a couple crappy emails and you might just delete them, but you probably won't unsubscribe. I send you some poorly timed or not very insightful generic kind of push notifications, you're gone. That's why the failure rate of apps in the first month is like 90%. And it's not just to sort of add this point, it's not just about money. I was on a panel 3 or 4 months ago in San Francisco. There was a game developer there, and he said they spent $40 million developing an app, a game that they pulled after 2 months. Because if you get it wrong, you get it wrong, which kind of goes to the conversation that we're having and kind of helping you think about, hey, if I'm going to go do this, whether it costs me $40 million or $4, I need to break down the basics. I need to understand the psychology. I need to know my customer journey. I need to know how I'm going to retain those people. So all those kind of fundamental questions that it's easy to skate by are the things you need to think about.
What do you think about mobile VR?
Well, we're not even in VR yet, so you can ask me in a couple years when we get to VR, but I'm skeptical. It's like 3D TV, they didn't see a lot of those.
Getting back to that point of these guys launching a $40 million app and calling it a failure really quickly, I think that's a classic mistake of just ignoring that early testing phase, that MVP process. Fueled had a client that now has, it's a game with over 30 million users, it's really successful, and before they launched the game as it's known now, they had a completely different concept. They sort of disguised the concept by making it a really niche children's game, but just to test the mechanics, to see if the way the app works and users interact with each other was engaging and sticky. And there were a lot of tweaks before they hit on something that had a lot of retention. And then once they identified those mechanics, that paradigm, they then scaled it into the app that they had intended on building the whole time, launched it, and was hugely successful.
Yeah, so may or may not be feasible. I don't know if you could replace your Game of Thrones guys with little babies, but it's a point
To jump in on this conversation, as a founder, it's, I understood the MVP process. You have to, you don't want to spend too much, you don't want to spend $40 million developing an app and then release it. But it's also a challenge. It's hard because you don't want to put out a product that you just don't feel comfortable with yet, and you want all these features in there. And it's a struggle, but a lesson I learned I think is very valuable, that if you feel comfortable when you release your app, you've waited too long. So I think that's something that I feel like it resonated well and made me understand, okay, I just got to push it out and then continue to develop it.
It's even true, I was going to say, working for a company like Not, which is pretty well known. If anybody's ever gotten married or knows somebody who has, you've probably been on the site. But the concern was, what if we get it wrong when we launch an app? And we just had to sort of suck it up. And you could have tested it under a different brand name, but the company decided not to do that. You do take a risk with it, but you do have to do this sort of MVP process at once.
Did you guys promote the app aggressively right at the beginning, or did you wait till you figured out if it was?
We waited a little bit with the first app. I think that's probably smart for a bigger brand, just to make sure that it's not like a big honking failure. You hope it's not. You did your research, you think that you know your audience, a brand like that should have enough expertise in the field that they're not going to come out with something that's just like, holy crap, it's terrible. But I mean, 40 million, I'm impressed.
But no, I think same for us. I think there's a balance, right? You want to launch and get a feel for how people use it and feel for it, but you don't want to scale prematurely either. So you have to find that balance. We didn't market it aggressively in the beginning because we didn't want to scale prematurely and crash.
And I think one thing too is you should launch something that you're kind of uncomfortable with its failure, but Also do it in a way where you minimize features instead of kind of putting out a lot of features that are kind of half-baked. We found that users don't respond. So nice to, you say you have this feature, but it doesn't really work, or it errors out, or it fails, in which case they have less of a tolerance to come back and re-engage with the application. But if you've given them something that works well, although it's smaller in scale in terms of features than maybe they had wanted or hoped, they'll tell you that. They'll say, hey, it'd be really cool if you had this feature, and it may be in your product feature roadmap, but it keeps them excited. They say, okay, this is going to work, this is quality, I'm waiting for this feature instead of being disappointed with it.
Yeah, I mean, when was the last time anyone searched the store for an app that did 10 things? Yeah. You search the store for an app that does one really narrow, specific thing. And I think a lot of founders get away from that.
So just give me a percentage, all of you, in the strategy versus put something out there and iterate, kind of contrast. If you're an entrepreneur and you don't have a lot of resources, and maybe you got one shot, maybe you've got 2 shots to get it right, and you don't have 3 months, 6 months, 12 months to iterate, and it requires a little bit more forethought. How do you balance those 2 things? Julie?
Well, I can tell you what the processes were that we did. We did have a little bit of runway time, so I can't speak to being a really cash-strapped, founder of a startup who only can get it right in the first month. I would imagine most founders want to give themselves a little lead time so that they at least have a few months to work with. But you definitely want to be really draconian and have that meeting of the minds where you've got the business side and the engineering side, and everybody comes together and you're like, this is what we can build in X period of time. It could be 3 months, maybe it's going to be, if you're doing a hackathon, it's whatever, it's 72 hours or something like that. You can do it, as long as you know what the hypotheses are that you're planning to test, and that they're important to your business to get that answer and get it right. That's how I would suggest you could go about doing things on a shoestring and really, kind of driving out whether your hypotheses are holding water.
Mohsin, how do you guys deal with that?
So for us, we were more strapped than you might have been, but for us, I think we tested it and we didn't push it very aggressively. We saw what people liked, what people didn't like, and I think for us, being able to see how people responded helped us go out and raise more capital. So it's not, you don't necessarily need to succeed with usage to really go out there and to raise another round or to raise some capital to keep going. So for us, we wanted to prove the concept. So we wanted to get the proof of concept, which we were able to do, and then we actually scaled back. So we launched in December. We scaled a little bit during the holidays, and after the holidays, we scaled back because we knew our burn rate, and we knew that we had to scale back, and we had to take the data that we got from our first month and really go out there and show that this concept is working. We needed a little more capital to help keep developing it. So that's how we handled it.
Anybody in the audience building an app right now? Mr. Red Shirt, tell us how you think about that balance of strategy versus, hey, I've got to just get, V1 out there and live and learn. Or if you don't want somebody else. Okay, so you're the technical guy, you're the smart guy? All right, I need a marketing guy who maybe isn't as technical. Go ahead, man.
So I'm building a carpooling app for parents, and the trick is, it's called CleverTap. It's live in the App Store. It's a public beta. The trick here is safety. It's your kids going in a car with the parents. So, while the app is working right now, we know it has flaws and it has, the stuff is not working. So it's kind of the tricky thing. How many features do you add before you know it's completely safe and go on and on and on, because we could spend another year making it completely safe, completely no bugs and nothing is happening, but that's kind of the balance.
Well, and that's a whole other dimension, right? If you have some safety issue or you're dealing with sensitive data or anything, that is going to immediately tank your app if there's a problem with it. If you're doing legal documents, if you have a problem with your app, guess what? You get in the water. What about you, sir?
Yeah, I'm building a new social media app, and I mean, you're excited about it, and you think of putting as much features, but it's not the best thing to do, because people are just gonna be like, what does this do? So I had to like go back to the drawing board before I even launched anything, and like rethink of what I'm gonna put, like the simplest, like my technical guy told me, think of the simplest things the app can do, and let's focus on that. And as a marketing guy, as the guy that actually builds the app, but not really codes the app, it had me thinking and rethinking. Okay, we shouldn't really put everything in there, but let's just focus on the most important. And it had me like really thinking of what the people would really want to use the app for. And it sent me back to the drawing board. And a lot of people that have passion for what they want to do, they want to just put as much nonsense in there as possible. It doesn't work. So I think, talking to a technical person and having both sides, it kind of puts you in perspective of what the users will want, and you don't want to put stuff on the users so they get confused.
Yeah, so a couple great perspectives there.
And I was saying, I think that's a really good point, and I think it's important to visit your feature, discuss your features with the technical person, but also with other people, because as a founder, there's some features you think are integral. You just think they have to be in it, but when you start talking to people, you realize, you know what, I don't need to have that right now. So I think that's a challenge, because you're in your own world where you feel like this has to be in there, but then you talk to the people, you realize it's not a necessity right away.
Yeah, you're often taught, if you've done any lean product development, I mean, I know GA teaches a lot of it, but get out of the building. Like, take, even if it's something really simple that you can test a prototype, it doesn't even have to be real code. You can use some of these prototyping apps that will just do a little bit of HTML on the phone and get some real people to use it. I mean, you're saying it's confusing to people. I'm curious about how you know that, but I would say, who is the intended audience? And just put this thing in front of them and start seeing if they understand it.
Well, the kind of confusing thing is when you think of who are your consumers, and consumers are both individual users and enterprise. And I think a lot of people that are creating apps are not really getting that, like, who's going to use the app. So I think you want to really think of who your audience are going to be, because when people create apps like Instagram, they don't really think about who's going to use it. Like, they think like, regular people are going to use it, but the person that has the coffee shop has an Instagram account trying to push their product, and they don't really think about that in the beginning. So I have to put that into perspective when I'm building an app, that I have to think of who's going to use it and kind of, make the features towards the person that's going to use it the most.
But it's hard to answer many masters. I mean, that is a challenge. Like, if you're doing a two-sided market, then you do really have to think about, who's buying, who's selling. In your case, though, I would suggest figuring out what makes, for the individual user, because as you say, the enterprise part of it, like Instagram, came secondarily to having a really rabid fan base of people who are addicted to using Instagram and have to go on there every day. Why else would somebody want to put an ad on Instagram? Right?
So just to sort of pile on the point that he made that I think is interesting, it's almost a left brain, right brain thing, right? You've got the technical guy who's got probably a more narrow focused perspective, who can parse things. Then you've got the out of the box, creative marketing guy who doesn't really have to build anything, just has to come up with some good ideas and isn't on the hook. So that tension creates the energy that ultimately gets you something that's viable and works. So if you take nothing else out of this, certainly get different perspectives and do your user testing. Just moving forward, I want to talk a little bit more about push notifications, engagement, how frequently. Mohsin, you said, you have people coming to the app 5 times a month or ordering 5 times a month. Do you, and CleverTap, and there are other tools as well that enable you to do this, do you have the ability to say, hey, let's look at people who order regularly on a given night, right? Because that stands to reason, right? You've got kids you're carting around, you've got meetings, so by and large, you may vary, but there's probably some consistency. Do you think about things that way, and do you go and target and segment people in that kind of approach?
So we do segment people, and I think we're continuing to enhance the level of segmentation, so we're still very, very early on. For us, a couple of things we segment is, has the user ordered, have they not, because they're still so young. and then we look at have they ordered in the last 30 days or not, and we send different notifications based on that. Another thing that we do that's unique for us is one of the features we added was, while our main mission is to fight childhood hunger, that you can share a meal every time you order a meal, we added a feature where you can actually choose your own cause if you have your own mission. And if there's a charity or nonprofit that you support, we'll share 2% of our orders with that charity every time you order at no additional cost. And we found that people, when they chose their own cause, they actually engaged in the app 40% more than people who just chose our mission, because they felt more involved and like they get to choose their own mission or their own cause. And in our push notifications now, we segment the people who chose our City Harvest, order meal, share meal, or they chose their own charity. And that way we can, we've done sort of push notifications where we said, hey, today, instead of one meal, we're going to share 2 meals every time you order, and we sent that only to the ones who chose, the order meal, share meal clause. Because we sent that push notification to people who chose their own charity, it wouldn't make sense. So we need to, you need to start segmenting users based on those type of criteria for some of those promotions.
And do you personalize the notification? So if I chose the United Way, can you put that in the push notification?
You can. We haven't done that yet, but I believe you can. Where you can
You can do that with CleverTap.
There you go. Yeah. There you go. Let that over.
Again, Brian, what about you? How do you think about push notifications? Do you have concern that they're like email spam now, or they're moving in that direction? How do you counsel clients who are thinking about engagement, and now it's really multi-channel engagement? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, a lot. You guys hear me? Okay. So a lot of our clients are really early stage, and so we intentionally don't want to spend a ton of time thinking about push and segmentation. There's just not enough users to segment at that point. For some of our later stage,
Your mic's not on.
I suspected. How about now? There we go. So yeah, a lot of our users are too early stage to really justify or think about special push notifications, or even really get deep into push notifications. So we're just trying to figure out some other stuff, and we also don't want to cloud the data points of do they come back just because we sent them that push? Would they come back anyway? Was it compelling enough? So sometimes we intentionally want to avoid that. With some of the later stage projects, we do want to segment. We want to think of, and we also want to have a lot of purpose behind our push notifications. Tying them to specific features, specific events, specific KPIs that we're trying to achieve. We also want to be mindful of not sending too many. One of the risks with push is if the user turns off push for the phone, or because you sent too many notifications, or they turn it off for your app, that's it. It's just off, period. Whereas with email, let's say you're a store and you're sending some marketing emails and the user unsubscribes from those marketing emails, you're still able to send them emails for when they buy something or tied to some other particular use cases, but you lose that with push notifications. And so while it's a little more intimate, it's also higher risk if you're using it wrong and you lose the user altogether.
I have a quick question for you on push notifications and permissions. How often, when you guys are in the stage of building those, do you put in the double permissions where it's on your app level and OS level? Because as you just noted, going into expecting a user to go in through all those steps when it's so hard to find in your settings is a disaster.
So his question is basically when you ask someone for the permission to send them a push notification, should you also warn them first, like a lot of apps tend to do? That's been shown to increase conversion rates to people accepting your push notifications. But I think a more important thing to think about is when you ask. So how you ask is important, but are you asking at a point when they're thinking about a good notification they're going to get, or is it just when they're signing up, they don't even really understand the full value of your product yet? Then it's a little different, but like imagine buying something and then the app says, well, do you want to know when this gets shipped? Hell yeah, I do. And then you're definitely going to enable push notifications, and that opens the door for all of our notifications. So that timing is, I think, the most critical component.
For us, the way we did it is when you first download the app, you have a few intro slides, and one of the intro slides says, do you want credits every time you share pictures? And if they hit yes, and it's sort of saying, then please accept push notifications, to send you those notifications. So that's the value prop. We try to, you were mentioning, we tried a value proposition to the push notification.
Sure. Yeah, I think you definitely have to. Some people have a pretty strong opinion that it's poor design, that should be better placed, just like you said, showing you the value of it before you say, having you say yes in your head, of course, I want that before here's a new option. Just curious.
So one of the, just to jump in here, one of the cheats that you new push notifications people, and it actually includes everybody, including me, should do is go look at Marketo or Eloqua or HubSpot and read about nurturing. Nurturing is the same concept, right? How do we send sequential emails? But there's more science behind and more thought behind that whole process than there is with push notifications. It still amazes me how many marketers don't really understand the basic psychology behind getting the timing right, personalizing, getting the messaging right, you know, all those kind of elements that are going to increase the likelihood that somebody's going to engage. Julia, you've worked in multiple channels. What's your perspective on email versus push, and how do you get the formula right? And
Yeah, I mean, I've worked less, I actually haven't worked so much on email, so I will defer to somebody else for that opinion. But, you know, the Knot, for example, sent an awful lot of emails out to users, and there were a lot of complaints about being bombarded with, like, for example, local vendors. When you're getting married, you know, what happens is you sign up, and then these local vendors will contact you. So the DJ and the, you know, the whatever, the wedding hall and so forth. And most of my experience, though, is in push notification, and I would say, you know, you just have to be really careful. Make sure that if you're working in a bigger company where there's a separate marketing department, that you're all on the same page, because what you do not want to do is bombard the same user. So if I'm segmenting out certain users, as we were talking about before, based on, you know, maybe geography or what their activities are, and so forth. I want to make sure that they're not getting a whole slew of campaigns at the same time. It's an awful user experience, and they're just going to have a really negative, you know, opinion about you as a company or you as a product if they feel like this is not helping me, or I'm just being bombarded, my privacy is being invaded. That would be my takeaway.
yeah, I've seen a lot of development around the idea of omni-channel. So understanding, hey, if you're sending something in the middle of the day, what's a better device to be doing that on, and having that thought through properly. Go ahead.
For sure, but I was wondering what the extent is of the data that you're gathering. Is it going into third-party data firms and so on, or is it staying strictly with the vendors?
So right now, it's staying strictly with us. We have a dashboard that we share with the restaurants that are on our platform to give them the data. But right now, because we're still very early, the dish level ratings and the pictures are still, we're keeping them, we're storing them, and we're going to figure out, obviously we're going to start using them on the app. We're thinking of launching a sort of like a news feed type of thing within the app, and we're going to do a lot of cool features like that where we're going to start utilizing some of that data, but we haven't utilized a lot of it yet. It's still very early for us.
Just to follow up on that, sir, is the concern that the data is being shared with third parties, or is it just how are they using it?
Just wondering, because you know there is concerns, of course, in the marketplace. I'm just wondering how far they wanted to take it. Because obviously,
Yeah, I will tell you, obviously, CleverTap gets a lot of data. I think we send 15 gazillion push notifications a month or some obscene number. But we're not looking at the data, right? So the compliance part of it is pretty substantial. Clearly, if you're kind of in healthcare, you have to deal with HIPAA or financial services, then it's a whole other layer on top of that. Somebody else? Go ahead.
Have you tried giving users any control over when and why they get push messages? So if you could have loaded it, like, I'm interested in this, but I don't want to get whatever when they first sign up.
Yeah, that's something with our application we had a lot of requests for, and we did that. So, okay, I want certain notifications while driving, I only want engine light notifications, I only want fuel notifications, I only want a monthly recap of my driving history. And you know, we enable that within the app to be able to granularly select that. And that's actually increased engagement because, as was already mentioned, the push notifications in particular is all or not in terms of notifications. So even if you engage some user at a time when they wanted to enable the notification, you may then incorrectly give them notifications they don't want, and they then turn it off.
Out of curiosity, how do you let the users know that they have that option to opt in and out of specific campaigns?
Yeah, so that was part of the onboarding. So we'll do an app update, and the next time you get in the app, we'll say, hey, here's some new features that changed.
Do you ask users now on the first install, after install?
No, so
Okay, you still wait.
you still wait for all of it, even non-push notifications. So we'll need location enabled, but we don't request that when we first open the app. It's the first time it's actually useful. So maybe you check, okay, I want to know what gas station prices are nearby. You're making a clear intention to say, I need to know your location so that I can check for where the
So a question for the two app designers. How did you let people know you existed from day one, once you actually were up in the App Store or whatever? How did you let people know that you were in existence?
So for us, we created a partnership with the residential complex in New York. So we made a partnership with TF Cornerstone, which owns a few buildings, and we said, hey, can you pilot this for us? It's something, and they use it as sort of an opportunity to, to get a good word out that they're helping fight hunger in New York, and so it was a mutually beneficial arrangement where we were able to leverage off their residents and use it as a test. And the residents knew it was sort of a test, so they were more lenient, and it gave us the flexibility to try it out without being too worried about having a lot of issues. So we rolled it out with a partnership.
Yeah, for us, we just got lucky. We got a lot of press written about us. Part of it is we went through a tech incubator, and so that helped in terms of kind of awareness of us as a company. And then other kind of online tech blogs, things like this, wrote about us, and that gained a lot of users. We were then featured by the App Store because of kind of increased user growth, so that helped as well. But we just got lucky that wasn't.
Think about it through the framework of the fact that you're solving a problem. So who has that problem? And then just get yourself in front of them somehow. I think also often some developers or founders think, oh, I'm just going to tell everyone about this product, and they're trying to really reach a very wide audience, but in reality, there's probably a niche audience that is going to be the most receptive to your message, especially early on.
Yeah, which kind of harks back to the earlier point. I mean, if you do your research, if you know who your target audience is, then when you start to put time, energy, dollars against trying to get new users, that's more targeted. I want to open up to the panel on the question of how do you get going? The press is great, but if you get a story in VentureBeat and you're delivering sandwiches, not really kind of the synergy that you're hoping to find. So how, and the world is becoming more and more cluttered, it's harder and harder to get people's attention. So I think that part of it, you go through the struggle of giving birth to this app, and now you gotta go get people to, you gotta raise it, you gotta go get people to adopt it. Anybody can step up. What are some of the cool tricks you guys have seen or used or seen in the marketplace that people are using to get app adoption?
I think, for us, for ShareByte, it's going back to what I mentioned earlier, is we've tried to partner with different organizations. During the month of December, we did what we call the Take Out Hunger campaign, where instead of sharing one meal, we shared 10 meals for every time you ordered a meal. And we had companies in New York Dash. So getting other companies involved where they can leverage their members or their databases and they can promote it for you, I think was a way that we really leveraged to get the word out. It's just using other people's databases and partnering with them to get the word out. And we did some press in December when we launched as well, and we targeted people, like for example in the Daily News, someone who wrote about hunger issues in New York City before, so we targeted him specifically with that story. It's trying to be smart on who you target, what type of, if you're going after press, to get the people who are most likely to write about you as well.
Yeah, so although we got kind of initial traction from maybe articles and featuring in the App Store, things like that, what we've seen that has worked well is kind of to the point of targeting these niche audiences. Our current users know other users that may like this for the same reasons, and so we're not a social application, but we added certain features and allowed users to invite people that they thought maybe would use it. We put a leaderboard in terms of fuel efficiency so that we incentivize them to do that invite and kind of implicitly tie those two together and allow users to then start self-selecting others they thought would like this.
And that reminded me, we also did a referral code. I'm sure if you use Uber or Lyft, everybody gets a personalized referral code, and These referral codes really work when both sides benefit. So what we did was a share 7, get 7. So when you share your personal code with your name and some set of random numbers, and people use that, they get $7 off their first order, and you get $7 credit added to your balance, and you get an email once they use it. So it creates a desire for you to spread the word because you benefit from it as well.
Yeah, so that's an interesting topic, which is how do you use social media if you're not a social media application? So how do you use that to generate interest in your product? Obviously, Mohsin's company has a little bit of a built-in advantage, right? Because it's got a non-profit, not focused, but component to it, and so that adds to people wanting to get behind it and promote it. So the question is, if you're doing something that's more straight commercial and doesn't have that angle, how do you incorporate that in there? I don't know, Ryan, if you've seen any of your clients come up with innovative ways of thinking about distribution?
I think partnerships is one of the best ones, hands down. Advertising, especially just get on some really early users, just so you start getting some data points. It's generally going to be too expensive to justify in the long term, but it's great for some early users. Again, press. I think one of the things that a lot of founders forget is if you get a story to a journalist that journalist actually is excited to cover, you're doing a favor to them. Their job is to come up with compelling content. So if it's something that's around their beat, they actually do want to cover it. So finding those right journalists and cultivating those people.
Yeah, the other thing I would suggest is if you have a writing bone in your body, that you try writing something and finding channels there, whether it's Medium or something that's more specific to a demographic, that you try and distribute your own content, not in a salesy way, but in kind of taking an educational approach. Go ahead.
I was going to say, we also have some clients that have hired campus reps. And if your product can appeal to a college audience, it's a super cost-effective way to start building a user base. People are willing to experiment, they'll install whatever you want. You just get someone out there to kind of pipe it on campus with their friends.
Hand out beer.
Yeah.
Solid plan. Arkady is a evangelist for CleverTap, and that's his job. He's not tasked with going and closing deals. He's tasked with putting on events and getting people to just be aware of it. Don't be afraid to go guerrilla. So I will point to Richard Branson because the last time I was supposed to come to New York, it's Monday morning, 6 o'clock, and these two women in red and yellow dresses pulled me aside and said, "Hey, do you want to go to Hawaii?"
Yeah.
Duh. But the catch is you have to leave in like an hour and a half. I'm like looking around for the cameras. This has got to be like, something that's set up. They're like, no, Richard Branson is right over there. And sure enough, there he is, standing in line at Starbucks. You have to scrap your plans, jump on a flight in 90 minutes. And so I sat there for 5 minutes thinking, well, I guess Arkady could do the panel, and and then it's like, wife and 3 kids, not so good. This week, I blew off work this week, I'm in Hawaii hanging out, send you a postcard. But the thing that was beautiful about it is I tweeted about it, I wrote about it, it got picked up in the news, and all of a sudden, for virtually no cost, they had all this awareness and exposure around it. So again, big company, plenty of resources, thinking outside the box.
I was also thinking about, I don't know if any of you guys have maple delivered to your office, but it was insane that when I was working in an office downtown, you started to see these sort of very, attractively designed, bags showing up with the yellow and the brown. And the design is awesome, and it started with a few people in our office. If you don't know what Maple is, it's like David Chang is invested in a food delivery company called Maple, and they do, really pretty decent food, and it's like $12 for lunch, maybe $13 for dinner. So it competes with the fast casual kind of market, with the Chipotle of the world or whatever, GRK. And it was insane because you started to see these telltale bags, beautiful design, everything was done really nicely, and then you'd start to see them cropping up like all over the office, and then suddenly you were like down in the lobby, and everybody, the Maple delivery guys were coming in like through the revolving door every 5 seconds. So kind of caught on that way through really good branding and design. That's another way of doing it. Knowing who your audience is. I mean, product people, tech people in New York, they're going to order out and they want stuff that looks good. Plus, then everybody got their meal, it tasted good, and then they would Instagram everything. And so took out that way.
So I think we're going to wrap it up here in a second. Any last questions from the audience? Anything you're dying to know? Go ahead.
How is it different, like all you guys have discussed in the B2B field?
In the which field?
B2B, or any of you guys B2B?
Well, Fueled is B2B, our clients are generally B2C.
So I will speak to the B2B stuff since I've done it for a number of years on the email side. Totally different. Totally different. Motivation is different. Everything is different. If you're a B2B buyer, you've got a considered purchase, you're going to do a lot of research. Consumer stuff is much more emotionally driven. So it's totally different psychology.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's a much longer sales cycle. Usually it's a bigger purchase and it's a lot less frequent typically.
And they're not going to be influenced by social media. They're going to want to speak to people, get a demo, et cetera, et cetera. So, Julia, just coming this way, any last parting tips, tricks, pearls of wisdom? Regale us with your intelligence.
Oh, yeah. Sure. I would go back to the point that I made earlier, which is, a couple of things I think are really important. Know your audience. Don't be afraid to go out there and test, proof of concept, even if you're using InVision, something really simplistic, and also just event tag the crap out of your product because you will need those events to be tracked if you really want to know what's going on. And you can use CleverTap, you can use whatever it is now, but make sure that you're doing it. And I don't want to steal everything away, but yeah, work with your tech team to make sure that they know what you're trying to accomplish and be partners with your tech people. Don't expect to just slide pizza under the door every, week or something and that they're going to be happy. They should be your partners.
I think I'm going to reiterate a lot of that. I think it's making sure you do user testing, test the type of people that will use it. You could, I think you could do a design with HTML that's not fully coded and see how people react to it. It's very important. It'll help you save time in the beginning because after you code it, the change is much more expensive. And like I said earlier, you don't have to get comfortable before you release something. And it's really hard as a founder. You have that internal struggle where you want to improve it, you want to keep adding these things, and you got to sort of have that balancing act. And I think what she mentioned also is get out of the box, get out of the building. I think you said, and really get out there and see what other people say. Because as a founder, sometimes you think too much about it because it's your baby and you want to have it the best way possible. But I think it's take your time and realize that there will be changes. You will continuously change your product. You don't have to have the best, most perfect product out there in the beginning. And that's something that's hard. It's a struggle, but you have to let yourself go.
Again, I'd say just think about metrics up front. Make sure you have all the tools in place to collect the metrics, and kind of importantly, maybe until you have something that's yours and you really care about it. This might sound trite, but definitely don't be afraid to abandon something. Go into something knowing that feature, that thing is just an experiment. You really have to analyze that and be willing to call it a failure and forget it.
Yeah, these guys are all touching on some great topics, and they're all very tightly related. Think of what you're launching as an experiment. This isn't your app, this isn't launching your company, this is launching your experiment, first and foremost. And that comes before anything else.
So 2 things. One, go download CleverTap on mobile edge to say that. In part because you can track all these things, right? It doesn't cost you anything, they don't charge you for that, and also you can send push notifications, like 1 million users per month for free. So there's no reason not to put CleverTap or some other SDK that enables you to measure what you're doing. That's the first thing. And then the second thing, probably the most profound thing I've heard in a while is I was interviewing somebody and they said to me, it's a big size company, and they said, there are no opinions here, or opinions don't count. That's what it was, opinions don't count. And it was exactly this point. If you don't go out and test it, if you don't get out of the building, if you don't get people to give you honest live feedback, you're just kind of living in a vacuum, and that's a recipe for disaster. So, thanks to the panel, appreciate everybody coming.